Hi folks, how's it going? James here. Welcome to part 2 of my jazz collection video. In the background you may faintly be able to hear this record. This is Johnny Griffin, The Return of the Griffin on Carrere Distribution. This was a gift a couple of years ago now from Martin Duke. Spin It Tweaks, Astral Tweaks, sadly no longer with us on the vinyl community, but often remembered. Great record, urbane, swinging, bop style music. This is the only record I have by Johnny actually, but it's a good one. 1979, Galaxy Records. The Griffin is a legendary creature, part eagle and part lion. Obviously a pretty tough combination. Johnny has adapted his namesake as his symbol. Really quick reminder, I'm not showing all my jazz records, I'm showing a selection of them, and I'm showing them in the order in which they were released, okay? So it might be that I have a version of a record that was released in a certain year, but it was originally released a long time before that, but I'm showing them in the order that my particular edition was released. So, without further ado, here we have the amazing Bud Powell. I think this is the first Blue Note record I've shown so far. So let's have a look at this one. This is on a rather lovely dark blue Blue Note label. And yeah, Bud Powell doesn't get that much of a look in really compared to other pianists. He doesn't get as much attention as Thelonious Monk or Duke Ellington. He was a very troubled individual, I think. He suffered from a lot of ill health in his life. He had a very percussive style. His stuff is not very lyrical, it's quite kind of jagged and hard and very spirited. His brother was also a pianist, I can't remember his name, but he was a Powell, but he wasn't as distinctive as Bud. Right, let me get the date of this one for you. It's very important that I give you this information. This is a US copy actually, date unknown, but the dark blue labels of the kind I just showed you apparently were only used between 1972 and 1975, so that might help to date that. But this album was first released in 1958 actually. Bit of ring wear there. Again, this is one that would have been purchased from a jazz festival back in the day when I used to go and review them. Okay, so next we have a Oscar Peterson record, and this is Hello Herbie. This is quite a common record. Really nice sounding. John Bellamy on the VC, he showed this a while back on a video entitled something like The Best Sounding Record in My Collection. It does have a very full and intimate sound. So this is Herb Ellis with Oscar. And obviously Oscar Peterson doesn't need much introduction. Very florid, full-bodied pianist, 1,000 notes a second. Very virtuosic stuff, but this is actually quite a laid-back record. My one is a UK edition from 1973, but this record was originally released in 1969. Let me have a look at the label for you. There you go. And this is from Oxfam, purchased for the princely sum of £2.99. Not the last Oscar record you're going to see today. Right, this next one, I picked this up not all that long ago. It was since I joined the VC, and it's something that I don't do a great deal of anymore, but I used to just literally go onto eBay or onto Discogs and just search for affordable jazz records. I didn't particularly mind who they were by, although, you know, I mean, I would use my judgment as to whether I wanted to buy it or not after I saw who it was, but I would kind of search by price range to see what I could pick up reasonably cheaply, and this is one that came up. I've seen lots of people show this. This is Dahoud by Max Roach and Clifford Brown. Max Roach I mentioned in part 1 of this video, very influential bop drummer, very crisp, agile player. Clifford Brown, obviously, great trumpet player who, I think he died quite young. He didn't sort of make as much of a name for himself as he could have done, I think, because he didn't live to fulfill his potential. This record, I think, it's a kind of, it was a set of unreleased performances that they had done maybe for an album that they were working on and it hadn't been released. These particular tracks hadn't been released, and then they were collected together on this record. This is 1973 UK pressing, but apparently the record was originally released in 72 or maybe 73. It's not a first pressing. But yeah, it's a nice record, kind of bluesy, bop inspired. There's the boys on the back. Did I show that already? Max looking very scholarly and studious there. Love Max Roach. I wish I'd met him. I mean, he carried on playing until he was well into his maybe 70s or 80s. He died not that long ago. I just wish I got to see him. Just an absolute hero of mine. There's one jazz lick on the drums that I learnt to play early on, and if you sit me behind a drum kit to this day, it's the first thing I'll always play. Right, another Peterson record. This is Another Day. Let's get the date for this one. This one is 1975, UK pressing, but originally came out in 1970. This is, yeah, Another Day. Let's have a look. Get the label sorted out. There we go. Oscar Peterson he's a very popular pianist. I think he sometimes, I wouldn't say he was dismissed exactly, but his stuff it's kind of, it's quite easy to listen to. You know, it's not sort of spiky, particularly kind of awkward jazz like, you know, Monk and people like that. So it's the kind of stuff that can be enjoyed. You know, if you had a dinner party, you could put this kind of music on. I mean, it's really virtuosic, so some people might get a bit fatigued at the number of notes. Okay, next one. I love this record. This was bought from Oxfam for the princely sum of £4.99 back in my Leeds days. This is Chick Webb and his orchestra with Ella Fitzgerald. Chick Webb was a very influential and very great early swing drummer. He was actually, he was born with curvature of the spine, which left him partially disabled, and he was a really short guy, and I think his doctor recommended that he take up playing the drums because it would help his posture and just help his flexibility, and he just became one of the earliest and most well-loved great kind of fiery swing drummers. You know, he went on to influence people like Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich and people like that, and he had a very, very colourful drum kit with all these different quite quirky looking percussive instruments. You can get a kind of sense of what his drum kit looked like there. So yeah, this is a double album. Let me get the date for you. This is a US pressing from 1976, but the performances date back to 1936. Let me show you the full gatefold. I've seen quite a few people showing albums from this particular series. It's the, what is it? It's on MCA. I've seen quite a few of them around, but they're great kind of old records, you know, really kind of old cardboard stock. Just wonderful stuff. Love me some Ella as well, one of my favourite jazz singers. Okay, back to Oscar Peterson again. Sorry, because I'm showing these in date order, we're kind of going back into a little bit. This is Canadiana Suite, and my UK edition here is 1976, but the record was issued originally in 1965 on Limelight Records in the US. Let's have a look. And again, it's Oscar again. I rambled enough about Oscar last time, so I won't give too much away this time. This one is from Cobb Records, I can see, in Wales. Sorry, the label has been torn in half there, so I can't quite see how much I paid for that. Is this his usual band on here? I did mention his band before. Ray Brown on bass and the wonderful Ed Thigpen on drums, one of the lesser known drummers. And yeah, great record. Great to have. Right, this next one is a record that I've been waiting to show for absolutely ages, and I didn't get around to it because I kind of wanted to try and say something meaningful about it, but I never really kind of prepped it or anything, so I'm just going to launch in and just show it now. I've not seen this shown before. It doesn't mean that nobody has shown it, it's just I haven't seen it. Okay, so this is Stan Tracy, the British pianist. He was a veteran of Ronnie Scott back in the 50s, a really influential British pianist. He was really influenced by Thelonious Monk, and he had a very similar style to Monk, kind of spiky and slightly discordant. He had a vast back catalogue of records, you know, stretching back through time, and he never really became a household name. I saw him towards the end of his life in a pub, upstairs in a pub, which kind of just goes to show, you know, maybe he didn't quite make the inroads he could have done, but he's just one of those legendary British cult pianists. And this is his version of, well, it's a jazz suite inspired by Under Milk Wood, which was a famous radio play by the Welsh writer, poet Dylan Thomas. And this record is on the Steam label. I just saw Chris Kibler show another Stan Tracy record on the Steam label. Rather nice label there. And this is a curious record, really. It contains extracts from the well, it contains narration from the original play done by Donald Houston, and then there's Stan Tracy's music, which some of it is quite ruminative and quite gentle and quite lyrical, but then it goes into these really kind of highly charged, explosive passages. He was quite influenced by big band music and quite abrasive textures and kind of loud pandemonium elements coming through, and just a really interesting record. I don't remember where I picked that up now. I can't remember. It was probably at a jazz festival, and I've checked online now, and these are quite expensive now. These are quite hard to get hold of, so that's a good thing to have in the collection. So there, I've done it. I finally talked about that record. I'm not sure if it made much sense. I gave you the date of that, didn't I? It was UK 1976 on Steam, originally released RCA 76. Mine looks to be a second edition. Okay, next one. This is reasonably recent pickup. I think from my market stand here in my hometown. This is Eric Dolphy Memorial. Now, I still don't have his most famous record, which is Out to Lunch, and still looking for a copy of that. This one was recorded in 1964, and it's quite a kind of straight ahead driving record. It's got vibes on it, Bobby Hutcherson on vibes, and yeah, it was a nice record to pick up. It was quite cheap, I think. Let's get the label for you on this one. It's quite a nice label. I don't know a great deal of Eric Dolphy's music. I know he was involved in the kind of, he was on the scene when the free jazz scene was happening. You know, people like Ornette Coleman, people like that. But this is not a particularly free record. It's got some ballads on it and some quite gentle stuff. 76 UK pressing, but originally released in 1963 in the US under a different title. It was called Conversations originally. Okay, this next one is possibly my most recent jazz purchase. I found this last year. This is Passion Dance by the great post-bop pianist Mccoy Tyner, formerly of John Coltrane's band. Now, okay, so Mccoy Tyner, he kind of, I think I mentioned him already, he's one of these very virtuosic, very, very flashy pianists, and very harmonically you know, tricky, really complex. He had a way of making these enormous chords, you know, lots of extensions, and just absolutely double-fisted kind of pianist. I suppose you could describe his style as, you know, volcanic. It seems to come from some primal place, and rather a nice label. I saw him live years ago. I saw him play with his trio at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester. It was pretty awesome seeing him. I'd seen Elvin Jones a few years before at Ronnie Scott's in London. I'll make a separate video about that. So it's quite good that I got to see Mccoy Tyner and Elvin Jones, obviously two people who've been in Coltrane's most famous band in his Love Supreme incarnation. But of course I never got to see Coltrane himself. Anyway, so yes, that's a reasonably recent addition to the collection. I need to give that one a couple of extra spins, I think, to get my head round it. Let's get the date. It is 1979 US pressing. And who's in his band on this? Ron Carter and Tony Williams on it. There you go. So they were from Miles Davis's second great quintet, in the 60s. Okay, nearly there. This next one again is a reasonably recent pickup. I was pleased to find this at my local market stand. This is Duke Ellington and the rather unhelpfully named Unknown Session. It's got Lawrence Brown, Johnny Hodges is on here. It's quite a kind of straightforward Duke Ellington record. 1983 UK pressing, originally released in the US in '83, but it was recorded in 1960. And it's not a big band one, it's a kind of small band record. Just seen here some other names that I recognise. Sam Woodyard on drums. And yeah, that's a good one. That was a cheap pickup on CBS. I don't pick up a lot of Duke Ellington on vinyl because he's one of those people, you know, it's a bit like Count Basie. You see his records everywhere, and if I was to start buying them, I wouldn't stop, and I don't have, you know, space for it. I have some Duke Ellington on CD, and you know, if I had a bigger house and more shelves, I would pick more up. But I couldn't resist that one because it was called Unknown Session, so it has that you know, intimations of some kind of obscure jazz sessions from back in the day. Always quite alluring. So yeah, there we go. Recorded in 1960. And the final one we're going to go with today is a sampler record, Keith Jarrett, the famous kind of post-bop abstract American pianist. This is a great record actually. This one is it's an ECM sampler. I don't have a great deal of ECM in my collection, and it's a label that I'd love to check out more of, you know, on CD. This is a kind of sampler of some stuff from various albums from over the years, you know, from the My Song album from 1978, from the Facing You album 1972, In the Light 74, Invocations from 81. It kind of goes through a lot of work from different parts of his career, and this one came out in 1985. I do like Keith Jarrett's music. It kind of runs the gamut really. He does really full-blown, quite kind of hard involved stuff, but he's also got his soft and more poetic side. The one thing that I find a bit of a drawback with him, and it's just a personal thing to me, he's one of those jazz pianists who he grunts and squeals as he's playing, and I do sometimes find it a little bit distracting. But nevertheless, he doesn't do that too much on this record, and I pulled it out recently in preparation for this video, and I'd forgotten how good a record it was. No memory of where I bought that, but Keith Jarrett is somebody that I need to have more records of, really. I don't think I even have a CD collection of his stuff, so yeah, I need to branch out a little bit. Okay, perfect timing, the record is finished. There is going to be at least another one instalment of this video, and I'm going to show some new jazz records, as in you know, remasters. I've got some other bits and bobs that I want to show, so that will be one video, and then I'm also going to devote a whole video just to my Miles Davis collection as well. So stay tuned, plenty more jazz coming your way. Hope you enjoyed that. Leave some comments below, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.